I don't know why I'm smiling so much, because this did break me. So I'm going to talk about Final Fantasy VII. So I'm going to do full spoilers. A lot of people know the obvious one. I'm not going to do that. So if you're still sticking around, then you're in spoiler territory. So I'm not going to talk about Aerith dying. I'm going to talk about something which comes after that. Because Aerith dies, and the whole point of that game, you're playing as Cloud, you've got your whole merry band of people, and you're trying in vain to sort of save the world, because there's Sephiroth's he's looking into launching a meteor, and the meteor's gonna come and destroy everything and whatever. And sort of as plot revelations come out, you find out that Cloud was part of this company called Soldier, and that he was a child experiment, and that his mind is basically mush. As the game sort of carries on, different things happen where he gets mind controlled and does some bad stuff, and he's just like, oh my god, I'm a complete mess, I'm the biggest liability to the entire crew, and I'm completely broken. This goes alongside the fact that at the beginning of the game, you get a nice little flashback to Cloud as a child, growing up with Tifa, who was like sort of his, the girl in the village that he was in love with, and like he was like friends with her. And before he left to go join Soldier, they sort of had this lush like evening underneath the moonlit, skies or whatever, where they sort of hung out together for one last time. And he went off to go into Soldier, only to become a child, only to become an experiment, and everything went kind of sideways from there. So the thing that completely broke me, and it is the most roundabout way to get to it, because you've been playing the game for like 40 hours at this point, is that Cloud's losing his mind, doesn't know who he is, and he's the biggest liability in everything. You get this whole scene where he falls into the life stream inside the planet, because as you do, and then Tifa is the person who puts him back together, and she gets to show him all these scenes and go, look, we did hang out under the moonlight, we did have all these childhood memories, you did actually have a childhood. And I just love it. I love the fact that it's this one person who was always his best friend, was always this person that he was sort of infatuated with, that actually helped put him back together. And so he comes back out the live stream fully formed, ready to save the world, ready to be the hero that we all know him as. But it only happens because he got lost and was so broken in so many different pieces, only to be put back together again by Tifa. So it's that one scene where he's in amongst the live stream, not the live stream, and he's very slowly being put back together. And it's when he realizes that he did actually have a childhood, and he did matter, and he does have a purpose, and he can save the world. I love that moment so much.
Oh, yay, another sad one. I like these ones. So I, in a previous entry, like quite a long time ago, well, almost a year ago now, probably over a year ago now, I talked about when we played through To the Moon on stream. I was in bits. I stayed up till 2 a.m. to finish that game because I just couldn't stop crying. My face was that kind of horrible, numb, like crying, ugly crying face. But today, I'd like to say a game story that reduced me to tears was Ori and the Blind Forest. This is a game that I for reasons I won't go into, had to buy. I had to buy an Xbox One and I had to get a game for it, so I picked Ori. I had quite low expectations. I love a good stylized art style, so I knew it was beautiful, and I'd heard that the music was lovely, so I was like, okay, we'll try this. I like a good platformer, let's see how it is. And it's so much more than just a precision platformer / Metroidvania. Oh my god, where do I even start? Okay, so the story of Ori and the Blind Forest is... Ori is this little forest sprite. I want to say he's called a wisp, or maybe the wisps are the other things. He's like a little rabbit, and he gets like separated from his father, who is this big old tree, and the tree is like the light of the forest. Gets adopted by who I like to affectionately call Chubby Mama, who looks after him and brings him up, and together they eat oranges together, and it's lovely. But events happen, bad events. And it turns out that not everyone is very happy in this lovely light forest, and this light is actually poisonous to these night creatures. And Kuro, who is the main antagonist of the game, is a giant owl who has 3 chicks, and the light kills her chicks, and it's horrible. And so Kuro's like dutifully quite pissed off at this. So Kuro's obviously like taking it upon herself to go and like steal the light from the tree, which then kills the forest, which then kills all the food, and then kills Chubby Mama. So it's flippant. It just dials up to 11 like so quickly, and then meanwhile you're sort of like wondering like where do I fit into this game? The game is all about obviously going off on your own, evading Kuro this whole way, and it's got some amazing levels in it, and it's actually really difficult. And I realize I'm talking like for a very long time here, but I love this game so much. I love it so much. Put up with me. When you do finally get to the end, I could talk at length, but when you do finally get to the end, and you've gotten through this really difficult game, and screaming at my TV, by the way, very few games have me screaming at the TV. Ori, I was screaming, and then I was crying, because at the end, the owl, oh my god! The owl realizes, right, I love a good redemption arc. And the owl's like, oh, maybe I did it bad. Maybe all your children are all dying now because of me. So the owl goes and gets the light and puts the light back, and that kills her. And Ori is okay. But then at the very end, it turns out one of her eggs survived, and they have this owl egg, and it's like, oh, it's like a second chance. It's so beautiful. Oh, I knew I would cry. It's beautiful, and then the best bit is we're getting a sequel, and the sequel has Ori and this baby owl in it, and it's just the best thing ever, and I love it so much. I love it so much. Happy tears.
I cry a lot of the time. Like, I cry over like little things, like say I leave my tea around the corner after I've done a voiceover, I come back to it, it's really cold.
Understandable.
I cry a lot at that. I cry when the weather's slightly too warm and when it's slightly too cold. And I also cry when Josh ignores me sat across the red desk table. But in terms of video game stories, one of the biggest that kind of made me cry, I've already discussed this in an earlier chat phase, this is Red Dead Redemption 2. And you have obviously the big moment in there. Spoilers if you haven't played it. What are you doing if you haven't? So when Arthur Morgan dies, that completely killed me because, as I've already told people, I had the veteran's horse at the time as well, which was Buell, and his dying wish was like, take care of Buell, Arthur. And I was like, sure I will. And I took care of Buell, and then Buell gets deaded, and it's really tragic. But the moment that completely killed me, where I kind of just had an emotional breakdown, is the end credits after the epilogue. And the epilogue in Red Dead 2 is quite divisive. I actually quite like it, apart from the very long, prolonged setup at the beginning where John goes to the ranch. When you start building the ranch and you have all that and you finally feel invested in it and you realise that the entire game was building to Arthur's sacrifice so that John could live. And then in the credits, you see Agents Milton and Ross asking around for John Marston in the town of Blackwater. And the final shot in the credits is them looking at the ranch, which obviously then leads into the first Red Dead Redemption, and it just killed me. I was like, all of it was for nothing. All of it was for nothing, and I just broke down. I was like, and then I remember, like, I was getting like flashbacks to the first Red Dead after it happened, and I was like, oh no, and it absolutely killed me. I've never been more emotionally distraught at a video game because it was like, I went through all of that, and then the thing with that, the genius of that game is that it makes you forget about the first one. You're there completely invested in wanting to save John, and you think he's gotten his happy ending, and then you just remember, and it brings it all crashing back down to earth, and you're just like, damn.
Could you go back and play the first one again now?
I don't think I could. I think if I went back and played that first one, I think it would just be a case of like, the way the second game recontextualizes everything. It's just kind of like, I can't. The Old West is cruel and unforgiving, and people die for nothing.
There's actually, I cry at everything. I cry at films and TV. I'm a big crier when it comes to investing my time into things, but video games, for some reason, don't get as many tears out of me as like I would expect from the narratives that they do. The main one that has actually made me like sob was the end of Mass Effect 3, and I think that is more because I was upset that it was ending. It wasn't because it was bad, it's just because I was upset that the whole series was finished. This was the end of Shepard's arc, like they'd like given their life and gone into the star system and everything. I thought it was a really poetic and nice ending. I know others will disagree and say it's a load of trash, but I really enjoyed it. This was before the patch even came in as well. Like, it was the original crappy ending. I was like, ooh. But that got like real life hot salty tears out my eyes. The Last of Us, I didn't cry at, but really like the ending of that obviously needs a shout out because that was a gut punch, the way that played out, and the lack of choice you have as Joel, and that this is the only choice he wants to make is to rescue Ellie and run away and lie to her, and that's it. Like, it's such a poignant moment and impressive feat of video gaming. There's the end of The Walking Dead with Lee. Again, real tears. But the one that I actually want to talk about is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, because that was such an experience of a game. It was, instead of being more of a video game where you're hacking and slashing your way through and trying to get as much done as you can, exploring everything, it's all about the unfolding of Senua's like psyche and her struggling with psychosis and the weird like nightmarish things that she faces along the way, and trying to piece together her like piecemeal story together with all of the Nordic lore and stuff that you get from touchstones and everything as well. So the way that all of that combined, I found it fascinating to play through it, and I didn't realise how invested I was until I got to the end. And it wasn't necessarily one that made me sob, but it was so intense, and the way that it reflected on mental health and the capacity to deal with things and her tenacity to not give up and this darkness taking over and everything. I had to like fully sit back after playing it and just have like a weird quiet moment to myself. Like, I was all glassy eyed, like, oh, because it's just so, it's impressive and poignant and yeah, it's just a fantastic game. It's hard to put into words because it's one of those ones that plays with you as much as it does you play it, and the way that it's put together is just so fantastically like straight into the soul with all the dark stuff that happens in it. But yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I think that's the one that deserves the main shout out. As much as it didn't render me like a blubbering mess, it affected me in a way that I think is a much more important. It made my insides cry. It made my brain cry afterwards because I was like, oh. But yeah. All the other ones I feel like cried from the emotional impact, whereas that one it changed the way that I think about things, and it like upset me. It upset me thinking that that's some people's experience, and upset me seeing all the stuff that she had to go through as like a horrific story. But yeah, Senua's Sacrifice.
It's one that I really didn't expect, because I went into Insomniac's Spider-Man really looking forward to it, obviously, and I thought the story had a really cool setup. They were using interesting new villains, but I didn't expect to come out the other end absolutely weeping and crying, and that's eventually what happened, because when you get to the end of that movie, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is faced with this choice. He has a vial of the antidote that is to a virus that is sweeping the city in his hand, but he can't mass produce it for a little while, but Aunt May is stricken with the same virus and she's in bed, she's near death. So he has this choice of either he uses it all on Aunt May and dooms the entire city, or he lets Aunt May die. And obviously, that's a selfish act. That's not what comes with great power comes great responsibility. That's antithesis to who Spider-Man is. And when he's in that room with Aunt May and he's talking to her and he's looking at her, and it's heartbreaking to sort of see him go through the motions of deciding what to do. And then it really ratchets it up a notch when he sits down, he kneels down beside her, and he's got the full mask on, obviously. And all the way through the game, you're under the assumption that Aunt May doesn't know who Spider-Man is. And then she says something along the lines of, I want to see my nephew, or something like that. And it's heartbreaking, and he takes it off, and the tears are rolling down. It's just such a tender, heartwarming moment, and for me, it kind of sums up everything that Spider-Man is and why I love the character so much. The character works because he's ultimately so human and so relatable. He deals with things that we deal with. Yes, we might not have been faced with a choice to save the entire city or save someone we love, but we've all sort of, felt that tender connection between a family member or a friend, and we've had to sort of potentially watch them go through difficult times or potentially even die. And I think a lot of us have that special bond. If you're lucky enough to have a grandmother or an aunt or someone like that close to you, have that kind of motherly potential bond. And I think that to a lot of people is so special, and especially to Spider-Man and Aunt May, all the way through the movies, all the way through the comics. The relationship between those two has just been absolutely spot on and so tender, and kind of what grounds Spider-Man for me in a lot of ways. And I think that it's a connection that makes him feel so human and so relatable, and it's just so powerfully done in the game itself. And everything's perfect. The performances are absolutely astounding. The way it's written, the way it's directed, the way it moves from Spider-Man from the bed to making the decision to eventually doing it. And it's just it's what makes Spider-Man so special. It gets you on a tender, poignant, emotional, resonant note, and it just ends the game kind of perfectly.
So for a man with absolutely zero emotions, there's a surprising quantity of games that have made me come over all lachrymose, and none of them include Parappa the Rapper, despite the abundance of dancing onions. So to begin with, the ending credits of the Fumito Ueda trilogy of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian all gave me a lump in my throat that was probably worthy of a doctor's visit. And the same applies to the ending credits of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, particularly when the main Zelda theme cracks up in that. It's really touched me. Conversely, it's actually the start of a few games have done the same. Firewatch, as it has for many people, and Ocarina of Time both made me really bleary-eyed. And I think most recently I was rewatching the introduction FMV of Final Fantasy VIII, and the beautiful dance sequence with Squall and Renoa when he's really awkwardly he's moving around two left feet, and that gave me some significantly wet cheeks. It sort of reminded me of a time when I was happy to be alive. So what, 20 years ago. Honestly, I think I'm starting to well up a bit now. It could just be hair fever.